Hello, everybody. Welcome to another football transfer forum. Introducing. I hope everybody is well. It is like a winter wonderland here up in the northeast of England. Much to my displeasure, actually. I'm not a massive fan of the snow these days. It's just like the world is. It's coronavirus. It's everything. It's snow. It's absolutely relenting. But we have got the respite of the next 45 minutes or so with you guys this morning. So we've got some great numbers on the Zoom this morning, which is fantastic. And today it's all about the guys at AI Abacus, and it's great to have Ramm with us again this morning. Ramm, good morning. How are you?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much for welcoming me. Yeah, looking forward to the chat. And Tony, thanks again for inviting us to the meeting.
Excellent, good stuff. And of course, Tony, you're looking very, very smart this morning. Really appreciate that. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ryan. It's a massive audience, really big audience we've got for this one. And unfortunately, I don't think they're here to see us too.
Well, yeah, I've already said to you that I'm feeling low about the snow and everything. I don't need you to kick me whilst I'm down, Tony. No, absolutely. So we heard, for those of you that were on the Football Transfer Forum last Thursday, we had a little intro, a little tease of what the guys at AI Abacus are doing, and that's clearly caught the imagination. So it's going to be really, really interesting to put much more meat on the bones this morning. But Tony, before we get going, we're going to do a couple of things, and we're going to talk about a few things as well. But I'll hand over to yourself to begin with.
Yeah, I was just going to talk very briefly about the transfer window and how quiet it is. There's literally been hardly any. I mean, a lot of loan deals, hardly any moves where a transfer fee has been involved. One transfer that did catch my eye was Sebastian Haller going from West Ham to Ajax. Now, this is a player that was signed about 18 months ago for about £45 million from Eintracht Frankfurt. He's obviously scored a few goals, but not too many. I think he's got 10 goals in his stint at West Ham, and they've just allowed him to leave to go to Ajax for around 20 million. So that really stood out for me, because what we're going to talk about today is how to make your scouting better. And if you think the difference in the fees there is about 25 million plus the wages, it's a big hit. So if you can make that a little bit more efficient and there's less players where you're going to lose money on, it's got to be a really good thing. I noticed in the guests who are here, we've got a lot of football clubs. So there's a lot of sporting directors, there's a lot of chief scouts, and there's analysts as well from the football club world. And we've got not just a Premier League, Championship clubs further down represented. We've got people from Ligue 1, Serie A, La Liga. So we've really got quite a European audience waiting to see what AI Abacus is all about.
Absolutely, I really appreciate it when you put the accents on the leagues as well there, Tony. I think it's a nice touch. But what we like to do at the Football Transfer Forum is, rather than just hear about somebody, that what they're doing, everything, we do like to have an anchor to it. And for a long time we've spoke about the inefficiency in the transfer market. And there's loads of research out there, Tony, about how, the money that's spent, and there's an unbelievable amount of money that's spent. And actually, if you look at the average league positions of clubs, they don't change that greatly. And as you talk about, there are these examples where teams lose, lots of money. So let's just have that in our mind as a bit of an anchor. How efficient is the transfer market? And I think we're going to start off with a bit of a poll to gauge a bit of an opinion of the audience as well, aren't we, Tony?
Yeah, I'm launching a poll now, and the question is, what percentage of football transfers does your club get right? And it's a bit of an open question. We're not looking for an exact number, and it's the club that you either work for or you support. It's just for us to get a feel. I've purposely not put 50% in there so we can't sit on the fence, and I've purposely not put 100% in there because that just wouldn't be true, would it? So
I know it's hard to believe, but we don't even get it right 100% on the football transfer forum. Sometimes
I'm thinking we're about 30% on a good day.
I'd be happy with 30%. It'd be an improvement.
But we're looking. I'm looking at it now, and it's actually it's a broad spectrum. You know, we're getting. You know, we'll give it a couple more minutes so that everyone has a chance to vote.
I think personally, looking at that, I'd be sort of torn between the 15 and the 30%, purely on an objective basis in terms of. What happens to teams in terms of their average league position, and also really the equaling out of teams spending a lot of money sometimes and it's not working, and then vice versa as well. Where would you be, Tony?
I mean, it would be interesting actually, because you could probably ask this question for a summer transfer window, and I think you'd probably get higher answers than a January transfer window.
Yeah,
I'd probably be 45%. That's what I'd be. Just because, and we're dealing with human beings, and it doesn't necessarily, we've all got to do our due. I mean, I was on a great call last night with some scouts, great call, and we were talking about doing your due diligence, and obviously, your best endeavors. We're still talking about human beings, aren't we? And they are quite, they have the nuances and their individual personalities, and it's not a one size fits all.
No,
type of thing. I'm going to just close that poll. Yeah. So if you haven't voted yet, just put your vote in the on the end of the poll.
Yeah.
Right, I'm ending poll. Wow.
Yeah, so it doesn't massively surprise me, that result. I feel like that's a fairly sort of fair result. As I say, all the research suggests that it's still a massively inefficient area within the industry. Tony, were you sort of concurring there, or?
30%. I think that's a little bit low, to be honest. But obviously the second place was 45%, so we could probably pitch it somewhere around the sort of 35%. Ram, what do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting. I like the way you took out 50 and 100 off it, Tony. That made a big difference.
It's not thrown together.
I tell you what, Ram, we need to those people who got 90%, and if they're working for clubs, they're doing a hell of a great job. They're doing a really good job.
Very good. Okay, well, let's crack on. A bit of housekeeping before I hand things over to Ram. If you've got a question, please do me a favour and put it in the Q&A box rather than the chat box. It just helps me manage the questions at the end. Ram's going to present for about sort of 20 minutes or so, leaving plenty of time at the end to get through some questions before we let you on your way and or for me on my sledge. Ram, I'm going to hand over to you, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. As I said, thanks a lot, Tony and Ryan. I'm just going to put a presentation up, if I may, as a starting point for us to kick off. But while I get that ready, what I wanted to do today, Tony, Ryan, and is to just chat through. Just let me get the presentation going. Chat through initially the genesis of AI Abacus, then give you a glimpse into the sort of a recruitment report that we run, etc., and then finish off by talking about the latest thing that's really happening in the transfer market, which is the GB eligibility. So those are the three areas that I'd like to wanted to cover today. So let me start off with the AI Abacus itself. What it says on the can, if you like, is predictive talent insights. And for us, that's the key driver. We think, as you said earlier, intuitively, football professionals know what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. What they are looking for is some kind of methodology to either substantiate or give them credible alternatives about their intuition. And one of the things that provides that is prediction. And one of the things we've lacked in football data analysis is that predictive element. And as you know, football is awash with data. There's, ever since we created Prozone and Opta, etc., in the late 90s and early 2000s, it's just inundated with data. And we're going to get even more data with the level of real-time tracking that's coming along, because the real-time tracking delivers something like 25 data points for every second. And that's just going to massively explode. But the lack of predictive intelligence to inform decision makers, either of substantiating their intuitions or providing credible alternatives, we think is the missing link. And about 2 years ago, I met a couple of guys at Southampton University, Professor Gopal Ramchan and two of his colleagues, who for the last 5 years have been researching game theory, game analysis using AI and neural networks. And they gave me a couple of papers which completely blew me away, because what they were able to do is what it says on this line here, which is to simulate the different transfer scenarios and analyze the suitability of a particular player in a prospective team. So what they were doing was found a way of using AI and neural network machine learning simulations to try and understand that particular element particularly well. So what we did therefore is took that concept and developed that into AI Abacus. So effectively that is the genesis of AI Abacus. And we are looking at 3 areas at this particular moment. Tony and Ramm, please stop me if there's anything you want me to elaborate on.
I just think it's a really important point, isn't it? Because I know with the sort of the advent of AI and other technologies and big data, there is perhaps a sort of fear that, what's the future of the sort of human involvement in this? But it's been really refreshing talking to you, Ramm, about it's not one or the other. It's where they come together, and I think that's a really important point.
I think so, Ryan, because having only worked in football for 20 years, football's been there for much longer than I've been involved in. But one of the things that really impressed me is the intuitive knowledge that exists within football. All the way, the first manager I met was the late great Jim Smith, and Jim was great, learned a lot from him. But after that, met a load of other managers. And one of the things that strikes you is that intuitive judgment. They know who they want to recruit, what they're looking for. And that's why we have the analysts, the scouts, etc. Because what they provide is information to substantiate it. What they lacked up to now is that predictive element. So what we have done at AI Abacus is to bring that predictive element to the fore. So there are 3 key areas our portal is currently looking at, which is recruitment, talent development, and team peaking strategies. We haven't got to the team peaking strategies yet in the portal itself, but the guys have done enough work on it for us to be able to slot that into the portal probably for next summer. Now, team peaking strategies very quickly. Every team is blessed with a squad of players. What they need to decide is how many of those players they want to select, whether it's 15, 16, or 17 on match day. And that's what that bit covers. But the key areas we are focusing in on is recruitment. It's just figuring out where the recruitment challenges are and how do we get there. And this is our target audience. Our main target audience is football. But when we started working on this last summer, a little bit under the cloak, because we needed to find out what our audience wanted, we got involved with a couple of media clients and a couple of player agents as well. And we suddenly realized there are 3 distinct categories of audience. There's football, there's media, and there's play agents. Because the play agents want to place their players and give them the best opportunity that they can.
Of course.
And football clubs want to recruit the right players and make sure they grow and they prosper, and they are providing that mutuality associated with all the stakeholders associated with the ecosystem. It's just not about the player or the club or the chairman or the chief exec. It is a total ecosystem. The fans need to benefit from it. They need to see a better game as well. So we believe in that mutuality. And oops, sorry, gone too fast. And also it's important that we have some kind of a KPI system to try and understand, to give it some veracity, some hook associated with the analysis. And we are focusing on 3 key performance areas.
Ram,
yeah.
What's KPI again?
Key performance indicators.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so we focused in on 3. Now, everybody's heard of Moneyball and Billy Bean. Okay, Billy Bean focused on 1 KPI for baseball, which was on-base percentage. And the benefit that gave Oakland A's was just massive. Where we believe there are 3 KPIs that's valuable in football. One is understanding performance, and be able to understand performance in some way that it is easy to understand, digestible and usable, not just having a KPI for the sake of it. It's not about how many sprints the guy does and how often he does it, but what does that actually mean? How does he contribute to the team, etc.? And that's what we are looking at.
Absolutely, and I think football in many ways has got bogged down in stats for stats sake. I won't mention the player because it's harsh. But when I was working at Wolves, there was a player there who had almost 100% pass accuracy. He never gave the ball away, but he never actually passed forward. I once had a bet with the chief exec that he wouldn't pass forward, but in the game, and I lost the bet. But I lost the bet in the 89th minute. So there's data points, there's KPIs, but like you say, Ramm, I think it's a really, really good point. There's got to be some relevance, hasn't there?
Yeah, I think so. When I was doing Crozone, I got a great story from Clive Woodward. Now, one day he saw Will Greenwood running around like a madman, and he said, "Oh, what you doing?" He said, "I'm trying to get my Crozone stats up."
yeah.
And he said, "Listen, Crozone is only measured during game time, not during training. So calm down, do your training properly."
Do you know what though? It's very, very interesting that, and there's lots of stories. I was at a League One club, Ramm, and I noticed this. I think maybe where I was sitting helped me do it. But when we got a corner, I noticed the centre backs would run back to our goal line, and whilst they were getting ready for the corner, and then they would sprint as fast as they could up to the opposition box, and it was getting their sprint ups in the game. And then like this player, oh God, you should see his sprint distance. It's unbelievable. But you know, it was all when the ball was out of play. So yeah, players are aware of it, aren't they?
Sure. And also it's important that players get the right information, because
absolutely,
you know, same as the managers, the players intuitively want to get better as well. Provided they are given the right information and they are coached properly, they will get better. And that's one of the things that we learned as well. So we're looking at 3 KPIs, which is performance, value, and suitability. Now, what we're doing is taking performance and value and then creating a thing called the cost-benefit index, which is effectively a return on investment criteria. We also don't believe all the data that's published on transfer market values, etc. So what we have done over the period of time is created our own modeling to understand transfer value and also wages value, because it's important that is as accurate as possible. It's not always easy, but at the same time, you can't believe on hearsay. And the third one is our coup de grace, which is the suitability. Now, it's important you understand what the player's style is in one team and how that style is likely to fit into another team. And you also want to understand the player's chemistry in one team. Why is he excelling in one team? What actually makes him excel? And is he likely to excel in the other team? And these are important criteria. And so what we have done is to put those 3 as our KPIs. And sorry. And there are, my fingers are going much faster than my brain is. What we have done with the portal.
Actually, Ramm, just let me stop you there on the player suitability.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think a lot of the scouts here, you know, on this webinar, will be maybe scouting some teams that play like their team, which is helpful. so that if they're set up in the same way, they're trying to pass the ball or whatever it is, they're playing in the same way. It's quite, you can then have a look at the players and see, all right, he's a 10 in this team, he can be a 10 in our team, for example. Whereas if you're watching a team that doesn't quite play like you do, that's really useful to know how he would cope in a different setting and a different, set of tactics, or the way the team sets up or the way the team plays. And I think that's a really interesting thing that I haven't really seen much of before.
Yeah. Tony, we are working with a few clubs at this particular moment because there's a transfer window. People have not got to grips with our portal, so we are helping them understand it a bit better. And we did a analysis for a particular manager who plays a particular style, and he's just moved to another club. And basically what he was saying to us is, what I want is people who can play the style that they have developed in that other team. And there are 3 other teams who play that kind of style. So I'm interested in looking at players from those teams. So what this is giving them is the ability to look at the style and get some kind of intuitive judgment on whether we've got our analysis right or not. So when we did the alternative, like I'm going to show you in a few minutes, he said, wow, I never even thought of that particular player. And that is the driver that we are providing within AI Abacus as a core deliverable. So there are 4 things the portal itself does. One is the ability to search for players. And we have a big database of about 130,000 players and all over the world, and it allows you to go and search those players. And if for some reason, and we've had this request recently, we got a request from Iceland and another one from the 2nd division of Norway, where we didn't have the data. Not because we didn't have the data, but we hadn't downloaded it into our analytical engine. But they came and said, we definitely want to work with you guys. And we said, yeah, we'll download it. And we have done it. And it's that easy for us because the engine is ready. All we need to do is and we just don't want to carte blanche download every bit of data because we want to manage the process. Then once you've got that search sorted out, you want to profile that player. You want to understand what this player looks like currently. And again, testing your intuition. I know what this player looks like. Now, does this match what I think it is? Then you want to benchmark the player. Who are the other players who play like him? Yep. Who are and that pops up another set of players. And again, testing your intuition. Look, I know these guys are about right, but this guy, where did he come from?
Yep.
Should I have a look at it? I need to go back and check his profile. I need to find out where he's playing, what he's done. So effectively, at every step of the way, what we are providing is that intuitive judgment, a bit more substantial information set they can do it. And finally, it's the simulation section. What the simulation section does is what we said earlier, which is to compare his style today and see what it looks like in another team. And recently we were doing a presentation to quite a large club. And we did a challenge with them. We put up 3 players of De Bruyne, Bruno Fernandes, and Wilfried Zaha. And we said, if these guys move to Arsenal, which one of those 3 do you think would be the best fit to Arsenal? And without shadow of doubt, everybody said, it's got to be De Bruyne. How can it be anybody else? Because Arteta has been training De Bruyne for 2 or 3 years. It's got to be. But it happened to be Bruno Fernandes. And they said, nah, you guys are wrong. I said, we don't know whether we are right or wrong. But what it's telling you is that in these criteria, for whatever reason, Fernandes fits in better with Arsenal. It could be because Arteta's methodology, which he learned from Pep, hasn't quite bedded in at Arsenal yet, because we're looking at 3 or 4 years worth of playing data.
Ramm, I can't see that transfer happening, to be honest.
I was going to say, also, Ramm, I think me and Tony could go and do a job at Arsenal at the moment. So,
Brian, that's such a big stretch for you.
Tony, the reason we put it up was it was such an unlikely scenario. And also what it did was just challenge that intuitive judgment. Because, we are only looking at it from an analytical point of view and putting stuff out there that makes sense, really.
Yeah. So Ramm, we're keen to see this in a bit of sort of practice in terms of how it looks with players. Whilst Ramm's going on to the next slide for that, start to get your questions into the Q&A box, guys. I've had a few, but yeah, as we edge on for about sort of 10 more minutes with Ramm, and then we'll be taking your questions. So start to get them in the box for me.
Shall I go on, Ryan?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So one of the things, you said was, let's have a look at how this looks for particular players. Again, we picked up something, and we did some work for an agent, and the agent's name's up there, and they were kind enough to allow us to use this during this presentation. So brilliant. Thank you, Adam Bell. Really appreciate it at Wasserman. So we looked at Odegaard and sort of said, okay, if you put that into our portal, what is the information set that it provides? Initially, it provides some basic information about who he is, but more importantly, what it does is just the AI-based computed values up there on the right-hand side. His performance rating, his attacking rating, defensive rating, his transfer value, and his wages value. The wages value we put in a range, because that's probably one of our weakest points, because wages is not something that's easily published. And unless you work with the agent, you don't really know exactly what that number is either. So we put a range in there. But the transfer value, historically, we've got a reasonably good handle on it, and we're beginning to fine-tune our machine learning engine to understand that transfer value reasonably well. That's why it goes down to the digit even to 872 at the back. That looks a bit too precise. I can't imagine anybody writing a check with the 2 at the end.
That looks like a very serious piece of negotiation, doesn't it? If you end up,
and are they rounded down for the pandemic as well, Ramm?
Yeah.
And so effectively, this shows where the person actually plays. The interesting things is how he looks like in the La Liga team, and more importantly, the 10 most similar players to him anywhere in the world. So what we are doing here is, challenging the intuition. And here, what we've then done is sort of looked at his attacking rating versus XG assist compared to the other players. And we talked about doing predictions. So if you are doing prediction, it's important we understand how this guy's performance is going to evolve. Now, this is based on us assuming he's going to go to a particular club, and I can't tell you which club that is because that's a bit of confidential information. But we also do what we call uncertainty principles with the analysis. So invariably, what we will do for anything that's predicted, it will be conical. So it will show you the ups and downs of it, what the uncertainty of each of those values are as well. And we do the same with the transfer value prediction, again, using uncertainty principles. And then the question was asked, okay, if he was going to come to the English Premier League, which is the best team for him? So we can flip our simulation model and say, what is a good style looks like, what is a good chemistry look like, and therefore, based on that, which is the best team for him to move to.
You're giving us clues now, Ramm, where he's moving, aren't you?
Well, I hope you're not going to rush out to the bookies and put any money on it, Tony, because
we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to, Ramm.
I can't get out of my house, Ramm, so we're fine.
So that's what that does, okay? Then one of the other important things is to then simulate it to figure out how does he look like when he goes to another team. So we simulated what is he like to look like if he came to Liverpool.
Oh.
What does his chemistry look like? What does his style look like? And more importantly, what is that return on investment number look like? How many goals is he likely to score? How many assists is he likely to have? And this is his career history, etc.
So Ramm, if he used Man United, for example, on that example, and we've got Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as a manager, would that mean that the a player chemistry index would go through the roof, or or does it depend on the players who were there and how he,
Yeah, sorry, Ram. Before you answer that, there has actually just been somebody's just put a link on the on the chat, actually, a blog that AI did about the importance of chemistry, and it is vital, isn't it, Ram?
It is. I think it's important to understand it's not just the manager, Tony. It's the manager, the team, the players who he's going to interact with. Is there going to be any synergies? Clearly, for a guy who's going to move from Ghana to Sunderland, the challenge is going to be how is he going to cope with that?
Yeah.
So it's understanding that. But the important thing with AI and machine learning is these are factors that can be simulated, and the simulation can be run several times to get the probability of success.
I think, Ram, it's important to point out that Sunderland are no longer scouting in Ghana.
You never know. They got a new owner coming, and they got a new recruitment director, and I think they got great ambitions. I'm looking for some good things out of Sunderland.
Yeah, no, me too. Somebody will put on the chat who was the last Ghana player to play at Sunderland. I'm sure.
So we looked at several clubs. So we looked at Liverpool, we looked at Bayern Munich. What does he look like if he goes to Bayern Munich? What's he look like if he goes to PSG? What does he look like if he goes to Juventus? So these are the sort of what if scenarios the portal is able to provide you. So again, going to the fundamental, this is about giving that human intuitive judgment, something a little bit more tangible to base their decision making on. Ryan, I think, I've got one other thing that I wanted to show. We did a similar exercise for one of our teams that we're working with in Mexico. And they had their transfer window in December, and we did some work and we talked to their recruitment guys, etc. And they said, right, we are looking to replace a particular player because it looks like this player's chances are he's going to go to Europe. We need to find who are the other players who plays like him that we want to look for. So we did that analysis, and we then provided them with the options. And they did recruit one of these players, which we were pleased to note. And interestingly, they didn't recruit the player that probably fitted them best. They went for a player because they felt this player would be better for them than the other players on that list. So again, we are not being prescriptive. We are being totally non-prescriptive, giving the guys something to talk about.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Ram. That's really, really interesting.
Ram, we've got loads of questions, but I like to have the first question, and because I'm the host, I can. So so the question I want to ask is, could clubs use your technology to assess previous acquisitions if you were able to get the data in it? Were they able to say, look at the sort of the last 10 signings that they made and actually see what your system would have said in terms of suitability prior to that? So obviously looking at the data coming out of the club previously.
Ryan, one of the fundamentals of machine learning and neural networks and AI is what's called backtesting.
Yeah.
So what we have is nearly 7 years of data on our data lake. So we are constantly backtesting it, because that's the way the neural network engine learns, from the data that's available. Brilliant. And it's constantly updating it. So we got new data coming in every week after every game. So that is being fed in, and it's constantly going. So backtesting is a key part of that whole neural network machine learning process. And we are currently doing a project to try and define what is a good, a bad, and an ugly transfer, and what contributed to it.
No, brilliant.
And I think an interesting exercise because
absolutely. I think going back to Tony's point about the boy Haller, West Ham have took an unbelievable hit fiscally on that, and it would be interesting to see whether your data and your system would suggest actually it was always unlikely that that was going to work out.
I mean,
let me get through the let me get through some of the questions. First question here from Mel O'Connor, I think is known to us both. It gives you a bit of a shout. Abacus, great piece of technology. Mel asks, what's been the sort of biggest success story so far in regards to matching up a likely scenario?
Ryan, I can't specifically point to one, but there has been quite a few. Like, for example, last summer when we were kind of working under the cloak, if I may phrase it that way, because what we were trying to do is to understand what transfers were happening last transfer window and what we were doing. We did an analysis at that particular time on Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, because that was the big story. And we looked at various elements of how these guys, which team would they fit into, etc., and how would they fit in. And we did some predictions associated with what is the best fit for Kai Havertz if he came to Chelsea. And it was interesting what we did. And if somebody wants to know a little bit more about it, quite happy to sit down and chat through the details of it, because it's more than a 2-minute chat, Ryan. But it's those type of things that really help you sort of feel very comfortable about it. But probably the thing that is particularly happy with about this whole thing is the team of people that we put together. You know, we've got a great team of guys who really understand football. You know, our analytics team of Gopal, Ryan, and Tim and Andy, and our software guys. You know, those are the guys who are really doing the hard work. I'm just communicating effectively what they do exceptionally well. So to me, that's probably one of the key factors in this whole thing.
Ramm, another question. Does the AI model take into account age factor and whether young players have a bigger appetite to learn and therefore can adapt to different playing styles?
Yes, it does. It takes into account what we call on-field criteria and off-field criteria. And at this particular moment, we got a limited number of off-field criteria. And we are currently talking to 2 or 3 companies who provide additional off-field criteria that will enhance the analytical prowess that we bring to the fore. For example, understanding a little bit more about the guy's social interactions, or the way his ability to meld from one scenario into another. So we are looking at ways of trying to understand that. You know, ultimately, the whole transfer scenario is going to change over the next 3 to 4 years substantially. There'll be a lot more analysis done, not just of the player, but the player's psyche, psychometrics, etc. So all these things is going to add to the ability to substantiate or provide credible alternative to your intuitive judgment.
Okay. Another couple of questions I'll put together. Is there any analysis within the AI on potential injury susceptibility, and where do you actually draw all the data from?
Okay, we get all our data at this particular moment. We get all our data at this particular moment from Wisecout, because they've got a really wide base of data and information that's coming through. But we will customize to anybody. Like, we're working with a couple of clubs who their league has its own data. So what we do is, for those particular clubs, we customize it by using their customized data to improve the analysis, to provide them a different analysis by feeding that into our neural networks engine. So to some extent, we are data agnostic, but we find at this particular moment, Wisecout provides us one of the best information sets that we are comfortable with.
Another question, Ramm. People were just asking for a bit more detail about sort of Brexit and the new GBE status feature in the portal as well.
Okay, so effectively, quite a lot of information on GBEs on our website. So go into one of our blogs and you'll see some really good examples of how it works. But 2 slides that probably covers the point is the system itself has a banding methodology. So you can see which league, which band your league fits into. So that gives you some indication. And then there are five criteria that the whole thing is based on. So it's about international appearance all the way down to the Continental Cup performances. And that for each one of those criteria, there's points awarded based on what's been done for this particular player. And the minimum is 15 points. And if you have 15 points, you qualify. If you are, I think between 10 and 15, you can appeal against the eligibility. But below 10, I think it's a bit more difficult. But again, we are only providing a guidance. If you're going to recruit somebody, I would seriously suggest you do a lot of due diligence on it before you confirm what's happening. But as with any of these systems, this again is going to be an evolving factor, because I think this was put up quite quickly. And so the criteria might change. But one of the things that it has, happened is there are a lot more leagues now become more eligible to come into England and GB than there was before, like some of the South American leagues. So we might find a different type of player coming into play in English football.
Okay.
So Ramm, could an agent, for example, put a name into your portal and then come up with the whether he gets a GBE or he doesn't, or he has to go to the exemptions panel?
No, by putting the name in, you immediately get a eligibility or non-eligibility popping up on our portal. But if you are then serious about that particular player, you just need to do the additional due diligence to make sure that the criteria is still applicable.
Yeah,
I would. If it's something more than about 30 points, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If it's on the borderline, then you just need to check. Like, we are currently working with somebody who's looking at a particular player who is at 14, and they're quite serious about signing the player. So they're going through the process of trying to understand whether they need to appeal or whether there is enough flexibility for that particular player to be recruited.
Yeah. I think everyone in football really is finding their feet with regarding governing body endorsements and how it's actually going to pan out this January. And obviously, because there's a low level of transfers, the system might not be rigorously tested. But I think, going back to David Seligman, who spoke really well on the transfer forum last week, I think he's sort of pointing us in the right direction, that there is quite a lot of players who will be eligible. And also, those players who came from South America and, traditionally would come into Portugal and Spain can maybe just come straight into the Premier League. So that's an interesting thing. And I think that'll be a good thing for the Premier League if you're a fan of having a world league on this small island.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tony. David did a great job last week presenting the concept and the criteria. We've reached out to him, so we're keeping in touch with him as well, because it's important that he's aware of what we are doing and seeing what is it that we can do.
And just for the people there, David's a lawyer in Manchester. I just noticed that he works with agents, and he's just helped the agent of Moussa Dembele move from Lyon to Atletico Madrid, which is a fantastic transfer. I mean, I know he's been with him since the Fulham days. So he's really active, is David.
Yeah. A couple of final questions before we sign off. Ramm, is the intention to over time include players from the lower levels as well?
We go all the way down to the National League at this particular moment, Ryan, because that's up to national level. There's data. Our system relies on data to be able to do the analysis. So if there's data available, we can do the analysis. If the data is not there, we can't do it. So lower than the National League at the North and South, the data is a bit sparse. But there are also clubs that are actively collecting data at the lower level. And so we get data from them to plug it into our neural networks engine if they want some customized analysis done. And there are some famous teams, as you know, in England who specialize in recruiting players from lower league and then selling them on for a profit. So that's their business model. Therefore,
Fantastic.
for them, it's important that they have data from the lower leagues. And if they provide us with the data, then we can slot it into our engine and provide them the analysis that they need.
One final question for you, Ramm, which is from Ahmed. Actually, Ahmed, you asked a very, very good question, but it's actually quite a big question. So I suggest maybe you email that first question to Ramm. His email address is on the screen. But I think the second question is a nice question to finish on, and that's, Ramm, how well do you guys do at fantasy football? Because I think you're in a good position to be dominating that.
Well, Ryan, Tim, and Gopal run a fantasy league team using the AI, and they won't tell us who the players that they've got in their machine learning team is. But I know year on year they come in the top 1%. At this particular moment, I'm in a fantasy league and I'm number 11 out of 52. So I ain't doing too badly, but I am probably having a sneak over the fence to see what the boys have got every now and then.
That's absolutely fantastic. Well, obviously, guys, Ramm's details and the guys' details at AI Abacus are all on the screen now. So please take the time to go and have a look at the website as well. Ramm, if I could just ask you to just sort of close your screen, that would be just stop the share. That would be great. Yeah, really fantastic question there, Tony. Some really insight.
I think I just lost you there, Ryan.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, just a few words from yourself, really, in terms of what we've heard.
Thanks. Anyway, listen, thanks everyone for tuning in this morning. We went a little bit over time, but I don't think we lost many of the audience. If you like what the football transfer is providing, which is insight, there's a little opportunity to network and ask questions and what have you. Our monthly webinars are on the first Thursday of every month. Next month, we've got Stuart King of Nolan Partners coming on. Nolan Partners are placing a lot of people in various jobs in our sort of side of the market, so sporting directors. So that's the first Thursday of every month. Myself, Ryan, and Guy Branson will be talking football recruitment and transfers. And I've shared it in the chat. And then we've got, in association with the European Football Agents Association, we've been doing a series of doing businesses in. This is part 4, and it's doing business in the United States and looking into the MLS. And it's really a how-to guide for agents, but sports lawyers, people from clubs. We've got Kevin Thelwell, who many of you will know from his time at Wolves. He's our guest for that particular webinar, and he's now at New York Red Bulls in the MLS. So there's 2 things there to point you to if you've enjoyed today's webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ramm. We look forward to hearing from you again in the future, and obviously everybody. We strongly advise you to get on the website, find out some more information, and if it's relevant to you, to get in touch with Ramm. Ramm, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ryan, Tony. Thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Indeed.
And everybody else, have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you again at some point in the near future, and obviously look after yourselves. Tony.
Thanks, Ryan.
Take care,
everyone. Bye for now. Bye.
See you later.